Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Friday edition of Believe in Bills. Adam Benigni just outside Buffalo, Sal Maiorana in Rochester as usual, and the man in the middle today, a special guest, Mike Catalana, longtime sports director, WHAM-TV in Rochester, been on the Bills beat. Mike, welcome. Great to have you here, man.
Thanks. It's good to be with another TV guy because our buddy Sal always gives me a hard time. Oh, you TV guys. So now we got him outnumbered 2-1.
That's right.
I just have one question. What makes him so special? You introduced him as our special. What makes him so special?
Well, I mean, it's a long list. I don't know that we have time here. We should say at the top of that list right now, congratulations, Mike, on your election to the New York State Broadcasters Hall of Fame.
Well, I appreciate that, Adam. I know I didn't get Sal's vote, but, I still snuck in there anyhow.
Well, if I had a vote, Mike, I would have voted for you.
Thank you. That's the nicest thing he's ever said to me.
And how many years experience combined is this, Sal? You and I are 70.
Yeah.
Right? Mike, how long have you been on the Bills beat?
This will be, really my 36th year, I guess, covering the team. Started out really for, I guess, if I'm doing the numbers right, the 88 season when I was weekend anchor here. And then, very quickly it became 4 Super Bowls. So, as we're all here waiting for this thing to go back around, maybe we get a taste of that again sometime in the next few years or so.
Yeah, that's certainly the hope. All right. Thank you again for being with us. And let's start to get into it now. Final preseason game coming up Saturday afternoon against Carolina tomorrow as we record this on this Friday here. And Sean McDermott, wisely, Sal and I both think, deciding to rest the starters. Discretion is the better part of valor given the long list of injuries. But some optimism from McDermott yesterday that by the time the opener comes up against Arizona, all but Milano is the only guy he's definitively ruling out at this point. So, I mean, the clouds have parted and there might be a little bit of sunshine coming through there.
Yeah, I mean, look, getting them back is important, especially as the safety position, those guys. My concern, it's great to get them back for the first game, but, these guys haven't played. I mean, Mike Edwards hasn't played at all. I mean, what do you have? 2 practices before he got hurt again. So I know he's just getting back out there. It is a couple of weeks until they start the season. I think that'll be important for them. But hopefully for them that these injuries are problematic at the moment, but not the type of thing that extends deep into the season.
I don't know about you guys, but I was actually surprised that he offered up that information.
Yes.
That he rarely, especially positive injury news, he rarely offers it up. So, for him to say that, I'm gonna think that maybe it is truly a good sign. I do know this: Curtis Samuel with that turf toe, that's a really bothersome injury. And the concern for me would be maybe he gets back for week 1, but I think you guys have dealt. We've talked to players enough to know that that's the kind of injury that really can bother you for a whole season until you get a good chunk of time off to rest it. So I'm a little concerned about that particular injury, the Valdez-Scantling neck injury. It looked probably worse than what it turns out to be. So I think maybe he's going to be fine. But the Samuel one has me a little bit thinking that's going to be trouble.
Yeah, I would agree. And especially when you look at it as the receivers that they brought in, I mean, those are the 2 guys that have the most NFL experience in other places, right? And both of them banged up. I would like to have seen Samuel more. I believe he had a similar injury last year with the toe. So at least I thought that's what I had seen. So, we want to see more of him. But to Adam, to your point, it is positive news for where it looked maybe a week ago when this laundry list came out of all the guys that were week to week.
Yeah, as I was watching Sean, I had the same reaction that Sal did. I'm like, wow. I mean, normally for tactical reasons alone, he would try and keep that as close to the vest as he possibly could. So it's an interesting way for him to kind of come out with that. And Mike, let's kind of widen out the focus here and get your take on this. We'll start big picture first and then kind of zoom in a little bit. But it's obvious to pretty much all of us who have followed this team. This is a year where I'll use the term reset. Brandon Beane, McDermott, they're kind of resetting the roster. We had Bill Polian on late in the spring on Sports Talk Live, Buffalo, and he talked about whenever you have a franchise quarterback like Josh Allen, there are really optimally, if he plays, say, 12 years, right? There are two windows. The first window they went for it, the Stephon Diggs era, let's call it. They've moved on from him. And this is where you kind of get right with the salary cap, retool, get younger, and then kind of look to add pieces maybe next season and beyond and reload for the back half of Josh Allen's career. That's how I see it. Do you see that kind of being the place where this team is at right now? And where do they rank for you on the competitiveness scale? Do they take a step back a little bit this year within that framework?
Yeah, and it's not just the cap, it's age in general, right? Because you've got some older players that maybe the cap wasn't as big an issue. It's they get to a certain point that you like the player, but you get 30 plus, you go to move on. And I do believe they looked at it and said, this is the year to do that. I don't think there's any question when you look at the guys who've gone out the door. Now, on the plus side, they had a series of players over 30 last year. And now most of them are gone. There's only a few left on this roster. So they have gotten younger. It is a reset type of year. Josh Allen just skews everything in one direction, right? Because if it wasn't Josh Allen at quarterback, you would definitely think, boy, this roster does not look like it can compete at the highest level. Allen can be that good.
Yeah.
I see what Adam's saying with, and what Polian obviously said about this, but I also believe that with Josh Allen as your quarterback, there really shouldn't be any step back. I understand you're retooling the roster, but there should never be a point where Brandon Beane is thinking, we're going to retool it and maybe have to take a step back. I think you continue to step forward because he is a superstar quarterback. And I think they've done it looks like they've done enough to keep the train moving. But I don't know if I agree with Polian in that statement of loading up for the back end. They need to load up right now and continue to just keep going the way they have. Even though they've changed some pieces on the roster, they need to have the mentality that we aren't taking a step back and we're going to win 5 straight AFC's titles and hopefully more than that this season.
I think that's the mentality they're trying to set, right, as they go through this process. I agree with you. Hey, look, I mean, they're my pick to win the division, right? I mean, the Jets will be better, but that offensive line is old, and Rodgers at this point, he doesn't scare me. Miami will be, interesting, but I feel like, Tua just is not a guy. I think they've had his number. I think they can win this division. Josh Allen gives them that opportunity, right? And then, I mean, if they're healthy and some of this youth develops and they kind of hit their stride by late November or November, December, that sort of a thing, I mean, they can be a very dangerous team in the postseason, Sal, to your point. I mean, I certainly see that well within the realm of possibility. I'm just being realistic about and trying to frame what they're doing in terms of setting this roster the way it is.
Yeah,
right now.
And Mike can speak to this too, but I think one of the biggest keys for this team this year, they got to find a way to survive the early part of the schedule because it is a meat grinder to start off. I mean, I could very easily see the Bills starting 1-4, 2-4, maybe. I forget who the 6th game. I know the first 5 are, well, after Arizona, the next 4 are really difficult. But it would not surprise me to see the Bills start off something like, 1-4, 2-3, 2-4 eventually, and then, maybe start to gear up and start moving forward. But it's going to be tough at the start of the year. And when you've got all these different pieces that you're trying to figure out where they fit into the mix here, I think the start is going to be pretty critical. Luckily for the Bills, they've had some experience in mediocre starts to seasons and then, putting the pedal down to the metal in the last 5 or 6 weeks and carrying that into the playoffs. So I think that's going to be very similar to what we're going to see this season, assuming they stay healthy. Because if they have a couple key injuries this year, given the spots that they no longer have strength at, that's something to worry about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's interesting when you think about when Sal's talking about if they have injuries, when you look at a guy like DeMar Hamlin, right, who has been a backup and has been that guy that if he needed to play, and he did a couple of years ago, he knows the defense. You felt pretty good. Well, right now he's been starting. And then behind him is a guy who has never played for the Bills and another guy who has never played in the NFL. It's just different in that way. What I was thinking, and when you guys were talking about the schedule and the way it goes, it's kind of fascinating with the way this team has won double-digit games and won the divisions and all. But every year they have probably multiple games that they have no business losing. Yet they still find a way to win 10, 11, 12 plus games and win the division. I mean, I don't know if they have that, I'll say, luxury this year, where you lose to New England on the road with Mac Jones. You lose to Jacksonville one year. Like those are, I mean, every team has one, but I feel like every year they have at least one, if not two, that you say to yourself, they survived it, like last year. I think this year the margin for error for that kind of stuff is tough. Like a perfect example is opening game.
Yeah.
Like at any other point, they need that. I mean,
I was just going to say that Jets game was the perfect example.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't possibly lose that game, and they found a way to lose it. So you're right. I think they've got less of a safety net this season. And, they've had a tough schedule for the last several years because they've been first place in their division. I don't know. This particular schedule, I don't know why it sticks out to me, but it looks like the toughest one they've faced so far. I don't know if you guys have really dug into it, but man, they've got some really, really tough games this year.
Well, you see the number of road games out of the gate too, right? And that it's daunting right from the start. So if we can here, Mike, let's we'll start with your take and Sal's reaction. Obviously, let's kind of break down the roster and where they've made the changes. And I'll start on offense. Right. What's your take on Josh Allen? We know where he stands and what he's bringing to the table in terms of his game. He's elite. But this group of receivers now and moving on from Stephon Diggs and maybe what we've seen and haven't seen from Keon Coleman, albeit just the preseason at this point. How do you see this offense in the passing game shaping up?
Yeah. Look, I came into it, and you guys know when it's training camp, it's the beginning of the year, you're looking at the new guys. You're like, what does this guy bring to them? What doesn't he bring? And then you take a step back now after camp, and I look and go, oh, Kincaid's pretty good. And I think Shakir really is just, I think I don't want to elevate him and think he's going to double his production just because he's going to get more targets. I don't think he's going to get 160. So, but I think that kid could be really good. Then you start looking at the rest of them. You say like Keon, I think he's talented. I think he's a worker. I think he's all those things. You know what else? I think he's a rookie receiver in the NFL. And while they have been better in recent years, to just throw numbers on a guy and say he can do this or that, I think it's going to be tough. I think he's going to be impactful, but it may be in spots. It may be in games as opposed to just the guy steps out there and it's 6 catches for 70 yards and every week he's done. For the Bills, that would be phenomenal if he was that guy. But I think it's going to be more big flashes, maybe some tough games, just the way it typically goes for a rookie.
I am not expecting a tremendous season from Coleman. Like Mike said, I think there will be moments when he'll be good and he'll be useful to the offense. But I'm just not seeing enough. We've seen a little bit in the preseason games. I'm not going to pin anything on that because of the guys who were throwing the ball to him. But I don't think he's going to be an impactful, like Malik Neighbors type. That's not going to happen this year for Keon Coleman. And I'll tell you another thing, guys, that I'm starting to think is going to be their modus operandi here, especially early in the year. I think you're going to see a lot of 2 tight end.
Oh, yeah.
I think Dawson Knox, he's healthy for now. He has had problems staying healthy. They have showed in practice and a little bit in the games that I think there's going to be some 2 tight end. I think Kincaid is basically going to be your third receiver. Yeah. I mean, assuming they're healthy, it's going to be Shakir and Samuel. And I think Kincaid is really going to be considered their third receiver because they want Dawson Knox on the field. And that's going to limit Keon Coleman's opportunities. It's going to turn Valdez Scantling kind of into a one-trick pony, assuming he's going to be healthy and ready to go. That's what I think is going to happen here. So that, again, that's going to impact Keon Coleman a lot.
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes through Dalton Kincaid, right?
Yeah.
And Mike, he was the first name that you mentioned. I mean, he, as he enters year 2 here now, really, I think his role really is elevated in this offense.
Yeah, look, he's He gave us the impression last year that everybody would joke that he didn't look like a rookie. He runs his routes very well. You sort of start taking him for granted a little bit. You watch practice. He rarely, if ever, drops a ball. They're going to look for him, and he's going to get more focus this year. It's pretty obvious. Diggs got 160 targets, I think, last year. So teams were paying attention to him. The ball was going that way. It's different this year. The way teams are going to defend the Bills is going to be different. And I think a lot of it's going to slide to him. He's not Kelsey, right? There's nobody that's Kelsey. That guy's first ballot Hall of Famer. We don't know where this kid will eventually go. But I do believe he can play the game in a similar way. He can find those seams. He can get inside the zones. Josh is going to look for him. They already have had a good rapport, and I think it'll be better. And I think there's times they're just going to get it to him. And the other thing I thought Sal was going to say with the two tight ends was just flat out they're going to run the ball more. They did it in the second half of last year. And I think especially early with this defense, I'm not saying they're a running team. You've got Josh Allen. But I think they will rely on it more than they did certainly in the first half of last season, when they will try to run the ball more to be more effective that way.
I think what worries me there, though, Mike, is I'm not sure this offensive line is as well. I know it isn't. It's not as good as it was last year when they did run the ball fairly well. I'm a little bit concerned from that standpoint that they're going to have trouble running the ball and they're going to have to throw it more. And also remember, too, look, we can consider Kincaid a slot receiver. He's not Cole Beasley quick and all that, but he is a slot receiver, right? He's a wide receiver in a tight end's body. And remember, Shakir looks like the ideal slot receiver. That guy, to me, seems just as effective when you put him on the outside as he is inside. Yeah. So I think they truly, and Samuel's the same way. He can play both too. I think you're fine if you've got Samuel and Shakir outside and you have Dalton Kincaid in a bigger body as your strictly third wide receiver with Knox doing the tight end work. That's where I was going with that. You don't have to have the little quick guy in the slot like we all think a slot receiver is supposed to be. Hell, Keon Coleman. We were told that Keon Coleman does a lot of good work in the slot. That guy's 6 foot, what is he, 6'3", 215 pounds. He's a big kid.
Yeah. Look around the league. I mean, there's a sense that this guy's an outside guy. This guy's a slot guy. Like CeeDee Lamb plays a lot in the slot. Yeah. Fantastic. What you would consider an outside guy. A.J. Brown lines up in the slot. Like even some of the top receivers, they move them around a lot. And so I think, to Sal's point, I think there's this mindset of slot guy. This is who he is. It's like saying leadoff hitter in baseball. He used to be a small, fast guy to steal bases. And, at times it's been Aaron Judge up there. You know what I mean? So I think the game has changed in that way. Guys move around a bit. They do have more flexibility with the pass receivers this year. Now we'll see if that flexibility is a positive.
What's it going to translate to? Before we move to defense, I think Sal did raise a good point. That's something we've talked about at length here on this particular show, and that is the offensive line and the true impact of moving on from a guy like Mitch Morse at center. How do you see that, Mike?
I like Conor McGovern a lot. I don't think this is one of those moves that is a step up. I also don't necessarily think it's going to be a step back. I was surprised when it happened. I thought Mitch was going to be around for one more year. McGovern has certainly made it seem like he's been preparing for this at some point. So I'm encouraged by what he is. I know they've had some snap issues. The hope certainly for them is that doesn't carry on. It appears to have gotten better. But in general, I still think this is a pretty good offensive line. I mean, I really do. Honestly, Spencer Brown surprised me so much last year because I was not high on him. I thought they kept making excuses for him, and I thought he played much better a year ago. I think they're more comfortable in this coaching staff with Aaron Kromer as the offensive line coach, and I think he and Joe Brady got into a nice mix of what they wanted. I still think they're going to miss Mitch, but maybe not as much as you would have thought right away when he was out the door.
Well, where he had called the protections and everything. Mean, when he left, several people inside football reached out to me and said, "Hey, that's a big loss for them." in terms of what they have to account for in that regard as well. Let's switch gears to defense. We might as well go to safety in the secondary, and then they'll kind of work our way forward. You guys addressed, the safety position. I mean, it was going to be a significant transition anyway, moving on from Hyde and Poyer, but then you add these injuries into the mix, and just to get people who not only have experience, but experience within the system and this defense on the field. I mean, there are challenges at a number of levels as you project now into the regular season there.
I think Kareem Jackson, believe it or not, could be a key guy for them, because you start the season, I can't imagine Cole Bishop is going to be worth anything to them for at least the first couple of weeks. He just hasn't played, and he's a rookie. Now, Mike Edwards, they said, I think Thursday, that he was back working at least a little bit in the 11 on 11. So it seems like it's trending in the positive direction to get him back on the field. And he's a 5-year veteran. So you have to hope that in the next 2 weeks now, they can get him up to speed and he can start alongside Taylor Rapp. I'm not sure where DeMar Hamlin is. He's got a hamstring. That could take a little while. Mm-hmm. So Kareem Jackson, who they signed as a camp body really to get him through, he's a 15-year veteran. He may actually have a role early in the season here. I mean, it's hard to believe. And he was talking about it yesterday. I know the Buffalo News, one of the guys interviewed him, and he's going into this preseason game. He's only played in the last preseason game once in his 15-year career, and this is going to be the second time. He understands he's got a chance to make the roster here as at least a depth guy who they can count on if maybe Edwards isn't going to be back, and if Hamlin's not back, and if Cole Bishop is not back. It's really, really a tricky situation for the Bills.
Yeah, it is. The one, sometimes we get surprised. Look at last year in different circumstances when we had no idea who was really going to be able to line up at middle linebacker. And then all of a sudden, Sean's like, yeah, it's going to be Terrell Bernard, who had been hurt, had played very little the year before. There was a lot of wonder of what it was. And he steps right in really from week one. And the guy was better than you would have anticipated. I'm encouraged by the ability sometimes for these guys to get themselves ready. And with Edwards' experience in the league, I think that's good. The Bishop one is the one that really, I think, hurts in another way, because these would have been invaluable for him to be on the field this whole time. I mean, he was here for the spring, which was good, but then he gets hurt and then he's out that long. I think that's gonna hurt him. I actually think, and I don't know what you guys think about, but I actually think Bishop could be a candidate to be somewhat in that Poyer role from last year when they would bring him in when they play just with one linebacker. I'm not saying week one. I'm saying at some point when they would play with one linebacker and basically three safeties. I think he's built for something like that. I don't know if they can. I don't know how long it's going to take him to get ready, but I think they had a plan for him coming in, and this really set him back.
How much does the loss of Matt Milano, I mean, Milano's loss into December likely amplifies everything, right? But within the framework of what we're talking about and his versatility and what Milano does in coverage, and I understand Dorian Williams is a very talented and gifted football player, but Sal and I have talked, when you talk about issues with diagnosing and that sort of a thing, I mean, that can be just lethal from a defensive standpoint, can really hurt you. So, I mean, how do they absorb that, Mike? And what's your take on that in the midst of everything else we're talking about?
The shame of it is we saw what it looked like for a brief period of time last year when they were both on the field together. And I mean, they played some quarterbacks that can give up some stuff, but they were turnover machines with his defense. And then boom, you hit the game in London and there goes Milano. Unfortunately, they have a history of playing without Milano, and now they're going to get more time with it. I think Williams is a talented guy. I worry when that's an issue for a player. It's right. More of the, I don't want to say mental, maybe is strong, but man, instincts are so important for a linebacker. There's just so many things. And Dorian Williams is an athletic, he's that guy, but he's going to have to pick up the other stuff fast. It would be a much better defense, obviously, if Milano was playing. But these other guys, this is where they're going to have to show something. And that's why I say when they go with one linebacker, if that's what ends up happening at times, you're going to get the best players you can get on the field. But obviously they're going to miss him for what he could have been.
Yeah, I mean, the Bills, they need Dorian Williams to be this year's version of Terrell Bernard. And look, I don't think he's going to be that good, but they need him to be pretty close. They've got to have this kid come through. And there's precedent here. It's going to be his second year. He did get playing time as a rookie. So there's an opportunity. And like you said, Mike, the kid is a great athlete. It's all up here that he has to figure out what's going on. But they need him to come through. And the Milano injury, again, what's happening with the safety group, that's where the Milano injury hurts the most, because they were already going to go into the year with some big question marks in the deep back end. And Milano could have alleviated so much of that problem because he just patrolled that intermediate area of the field so well. And now you're going to rely on Dorian Williams to do that, or maybe it's Nick Moreau because he's back after his injury. Maybe he gets plugged in on third down. I don't know, but that is, without question, that's the place that you're going to look at the middle of the field, in that intermediate area, and teams are going to be feasting on that spot if these guys don't come through.
And now let's round out the discussion with the pass rush, and Mike, will come back to you here again. But, I mean, a couple of things. Look, we've seen flashes from Greg Rousseau, right? Most recently, that Pittsburgh game, that's what the Bills have needed to see from this guy. We've seen, like I said, flashes of that before, but we have not seen the consistency. Do you get the sense that this is the year that Rousseau is really able to elevate his game and become the player that offensive coordinators really have to account for? And lastly, too, your take on where things stand with Von Miller and what you expect from him this year.
Listen, it doesn't mean anything, and I kind of liked what he said and what Babbage said. It doesn't mean anything what you do in Pittsburgh in a preseason game and all. But it was kind of nice to see, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was nice to see him just look like that guy. And he has shown that. He's been better at other parts of his game than I would have anticipated, setting the edge, making plays in the run game and all that. But come on, to edge rusher on this team, you need a guy that they are pointing at every time he's out on the field. I don't know if he can be that, but he is talented. You got AJ they're going to need something out of, but they got zip out of Von last year. I mean, nothing. The whole way through. He's on this roster. I think we all know because of the contract. If the contract was different, I don't know if he would still be there, but he's there. Has he looked better? Yeah, I guess we'll see when it's a game. We'll see starting in a couple weeks. But they need him to be impactful. And I would make him, and I think they are, pass rusher. Put AJ out there, put Smoot out there, put those guys out there, and let Von go after the quarterback. But Sal, if he's going to go after the quarterback, he's got to get to the quarterback, right?
He's got to get there. I mean, he's just I have doubts that he's going to be able to do it. But they're slow playing him in the preseason. He's not going to play at all, obviously. But I don't know. He's 30. Was he 34 or 35? One or the other. Either way, it's old. Not to us, but it's old for football. I'm just not expecting much. I think this is going to be a pass rush that Rousseau, Epinesa, and to an extent, maybe Dwayne Smoot on the edges, they're going to have to be the guys they rely on. And then you hope that those guys in the inside, Ed Oliver and Austin Johnson in particular too. I think he can bring, because Daquan Jones is a run stuffer. I think Austin Johnson gives them a little bit of push. If they can get that push in the middle, it obviously helps those outside guys. So I'm just not counting that much from Von Miller. I think whatever they get, it'll be more than they got last year, and that's going to be gravy for the Bills defense.
All right, just a couple of minutes left here. Final preseason game against Carolina on Saturday. The bottom portion of the depth chart being evaluated. Mike, just kind of some areas you're going to look for and maybe some position battles.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at the end of the wide receiver room. I think the kick returner comes in. It would appear to be that Hardy has maybe been going to be that guy. I don't know for sure. Who knows what they're going to do when time comes? It could be somebody else. Could be Ty Johnson back there running back kicks. I don't know about some of the other wide receivers and what they see. And some of it's going to be on health too. But you're always looking to see, does somebody step up in that last game? But I'm also looking at linebacker. I said it on Buffalo Plus on our channel. I think Andreessen's going to make the 53 to start the year. I think with the injuries that are out there at linebacker, he's shown instincts. I don't believe he's a starting player, certainly not now. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and play because it looks like the middle linebacker spot is where he'd be a backup. But I think the things he shows and the value of a linebacker, I think even more so in special teams this year with the rule changes. Yeah. I think if he looks decent, that kid from Buffalo is going to make the 53 at least to start the season.
If I'm the Bills right now, Andreessen would make my 53 and Baylon Spector would be done. I'm done with Baylon Spector. He's been hurt the whole time he's been here. He's given them basically nothing. I say he's a 7th round pick in 22, I believe it was. Just move on, because this kid, Andreessen, and again, I'm not saying this kid's going to be a star, but you can use him on special teams. He's got that body, that skill set that I think can help him excel on special teams. He's making my team, and I think you got to keep Deion Jones. I mean, right? He's a veteran guy who can play inside and outside, and I think they're going to keep 6. I looked it up. They've kept 6, I think, every year that McDermott has been the coach because of special teams, obviously. So I think 6 guys are going to make it. The guy for me is Spector, who's on the outside looking in. And then on receiver, it's interesting, guys. They only kept 5 last year, if you recall. There was only 5. Right now, the 5 would be Shakir, Coleman, Samuel, Mac Hollins, and Valdez-Scantling. So it might already be done. I mean, Tyrell Shavers has had his moments, but if they keep 5, it might already be done.
Yeah, I think if they keep 6, Shavers is the guy that makes this team. But I agree with both of you on Andreessen, and especially when you don't read too much into the Sean McDermott Zooms or the press conferences. But when he was talking about him earlier this week, and you remember, like, if you guys were watching, he kind of doubled back in the response and extended the comment and said, "If you know how to find the ball, you know how to find the ball." And that's a reference to the instincts, Mike, that you're talking about.
And another thing, I know he, as everybody's seen, he worked out for the Chiefs before he came to the Bills. They do not need the Buffalo kid from UB on the Kansas City Chiefs. Don't we have enough? Now with Xavier Worthy and even Patrick Mahomes, like, you got all that. You don't need, of course, Sal, if he went there, not only would he become a star, he'd be catching touchdowns from Mahomes somehow.
Yeah, you're right. They need to avoid that scenario. Yeah. Let the kid make it.
All right, listen, Mike, I wanted, as we wrap this up here, I want to commend the job that you and your team, Jenna and Dan, do over there at WHAM as well. Not only on the air, but in a space like this with Buffalo Plus. Very impactful and very successful stuff. You guys have done a terrific job.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun. I mean, basically, it's all me, and they help me out a little bit. But they're great, and we have a lot of fun with it. And we've been doing it a few years. So while you're not watching Believe in Bills, you can go to Buffalo Plus, and it's Jenna, Dan, and myself. And we have a lot of fun, but we talk a lot of football. And much like you guys, we are not afraid to say when something is not good with the Bills. And I think smart fans know that. They don't always want to hear it, but they come back to hear it because they know it's going to make them better fans.
I think it's an approach you have to take. It's one that, that all 3 of us have taken for years.
Well, with Sal and I, we're old and cranky. You're not quite as old as us.
Well, you know what? Someone yesterday, as more people learn about this particular podcast, Sal referred to us, the 2 of us, and called it Curmudgeon's Corner. I kind of like that.
He's not lying.
Yeah.
Kind of fit. All right. You guys enjoy the game tomorrow, and we will see you for the opener against Arizona coming up next week. Mike Catalana, thank you very much.
Sure.
And Sal, as always, thank you for being with us here on Believe in Bills. We'll talk to you next week as they cut down the roster.